Hello, hello. Thank you all for coming back for another episode. This is the intermediate series for SEDA College Online, so we're very happy to have you here today. I hope you're having a good day. I hope your morning went well. I hope you're staying safe, getting lots of exercise, and everything is going okay for you. Please, get ready and get comfortable. If you have a pen and paper, get them ready because we have a very good lesson planned for today. I'm going to talk a lot today about some grammar concepts. They're somewhat fundamental concepts that will be necessary to talk about the main idea for today. So if you know them already, wonderful. Maybe I can help you with it, help you practice. But for some, it may be new, so I'm going to spend some time talking about them just to make sure that everyone is clear about this. Okay, so let's get started. So the lesson today, the major points are going to be first conditionals and future time clauses. And in addition to that, we're going to talk about education, and the education vocabulary is, I'm going to compare between U.S. English and British English. So that's really where I'm going to make my comparison for that vocabulary. It's something I find very interesting because I'm from the United States, but I live in Ireland, so I get to have fun with British, Irish, and American English. The grammar concepts, though, I'm going to talk about are going to be essential for both of these ideas. So they're very important because they're kind of fundamental properties of a sentence, and this is what we're talking about today, are types of sentences. So what is the property? Well, that is clauses. So you might have heard this word before in your different English classes. Your teachers might have said it quickly when speaking. So I'm going to talk about the actual grammar and the structure of a sentence. So this isn't one specific grammar point. It's not that. This is something that is used for all English sentences. It's a fundamental property of the sentence. And so what is it? Well, sentences have smaller parts, just like words. Language can always be taken to the biggest part and to the smallest part. And sounds, words, sentences, paragraphs, essays, books, they all go from the biggest to the smallest. So sentences are the exact same way. So, think about the word elephant. If you look at the word elephant, that is the complete word. But I can take that word and I can break it into smaller parts. I can put it into syllables. So now I know there are 3 syllables in this word, elephant. And if I want, I can take the syllables and then I can break those into smaller parts, which are the individual sounds, the individual letters. Elephant, or E-L-E-P-H-A-N-T. So, it goes from the complete word to syllables and then to letters, and so you can go from the biggest idea to the smallest, and we can do the same thing for sentences. So I have the sentence, I like ice cream and I like cake. This is one complete sentence. It is one totally clear and complete idea. It has subjects and verbs, and it is totally finished. I need no extra information. Well, if I look, there are actually smaller sentences inside of this bigger sentence. And so I can take those parts out. I like ice cream. I like cake. Well, those are the clauses of the sentence. They are the smaller parts. And they can be removed and added to the sentence. I can identify them as one complete part and one complete part. And when I put them together, I get a sentence. And a sentence can be just one clause. So sometimes they are the same thing. One clause is one sentence, like I like ice cream. That is the complete part. Or I can put them together to make bigger sentences. So I can take clauses and put them together and make longer ones, like I like ice cream and I like cake. So that's basically what a clause is. It's just one part of a sentence. And they can be, one clause equals one sentence, or it can be multiple clauses together to make one sentence. Additionally, these clauses have types. So there are two types. There are independent, meaning they are totally complete, and there are dependent, meaning they are incomplete. So what do I mean by that? Well, let's look at my previous example. I like ice cream and I like cake. If I look at the clauses, they are totally complete. They are grammatical, full English sentences. I like cake, I like ice cream. So they're independent. I do not need any more information, no other words, nothing. They're totally independent. But in a different sentence, maybe something like, before I go to work, I always eat breakfast. Well, this is different because now we can identify the two parts. So we see that there are two clauses here. Before I go to work, and the clause, I always eat breakfast. So now I can see there are two clauses. How do I know if I have more than one clause? Well, a clause is similar to a sentence. So you'll have a subject and a verb, because you're putting them together. So I can look and I can take the parts away. Before I go to work. Well, this is an incomplete sentence. It's dependent. I cannot turn to my friend and say, before I go to work. It doesn't work. Your friend will go, okay, yes, what happens before you go to work? What? You need more information to complete the idea. That's why this is an independent clause, a dependent clause, because it's not finished, it's not complete. I need more. On the other hand, I always eat breakfast. Well, there we have another independent clause. It's totally complete. No more information. I turn to my friend. I always eat breakfast. Your friend may go, strange, but all right, good for you. Good. But it is a complete idea. So that's the difference. A dependent clause it cannot be alone. It is incomplete. It is not a finished idea. It must attach to an independent clause. They always attach together. A dependent must connect to an independent because it cannot be alone. It's not finished. It must be with something that is finished, so an independent clause. So this is one of the fundamental properties of how we construct sentences together, is by looking at clauses and how the clauses can go together. So I'm not going to spend. We could talk a lot about this because there are different ways to put them together. You can make different sentences. You can connect them in different ways. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but try to have this idea of a clause in your head, because for the next two grammar points, the future and conditionals, we need them. So then, let's look at the first conditional. Well, the first conditional is to talk about future situations and possible consequences, of your actions. So consequences are similar to outcomes. What will happen if I do this? That's what you're thinking about. And we make conditional sentences with clauses. That's why it's so important. So the form of a conditional sentence is if plus the present simple, and then subject plus will, and then you can say not if you need it, and then the verb in the base. So if you see if plus present simple, well, now this means we have a dependent clause. So we have one subject, one sentence here, subject will, and the future, a future tense sentence. So to make the conditional, we add a dependent clause with if. That's what we're doing. We're taking a normal future sentence, and then we add another if dependent clause. And so the idea, though, so we're thinking about real situations and real outcomes. So if you think about it, you're standing now. This line is now. And what I'm thinking about with the future are if ideas, if this, if this, if this. So I'm thinking about potential futures, potential outcomes, but they are real. They are not in your head. They are not imaginary. They are real actions that you want to do or something will do if something happens. So, for example, if it rains this afternoon, I will take the bus home. So you're standing now, and you have two options ahead. Rain, no rain. So if it rains, I'll take the bus. That's what will happen. If it doesn't rain, well, I won't. So that's what we're thinking about here with these conditionals, are these real situations and real outcomes. So here we go, another example. I play video games if I have free time. So here we have your future, I have free time, okay. If I do, I'll play video games. If not, I won't. So that's what these ideas are for the first conditional. We're always putting forward real outcomes and things you will or you will not do. So they're direct, and they're always focusing on what is real. So additionally, let's look at these clauses here. So and very similar to my previous example, before I go to work, I always eat breakfast. Well, this works the same way. If it rains this afternoon is a dependent clause because it is not complete. I need the outcome. What will happen? If it rains this afternoon. What? What will you do, or what is going to happen if it rains this afternoon? So we know that it's a dependent clause. You must always put an if sentence with a real complete sentence as well. They always come together. And additionally, they can come at the first part of the sentence. They can come, before the complete sentence, or they can come after the complete sentence. It doesn't matter. But what is important is if it comes first, you need a comma. So this is one of the rules for English punctuation. If you put a dependent clause at the beginning of a sentence, you need a comma. It's one of the writing rules of English. If you look at my previous example as well, there's a comma here. This is because the dependent clause is first. So if it's first, you need a comma. If it isn't first, you don't need a comma. So that's just one of the writing rules for this, is a comma or not. Okay, but that's it for the first conditional. It's kind of the most straightforward. You're just talking about actions. If this, I'll do this. If not, I'll do that. Plain and simple. So there are some additional notes, though, that I do want to point out about the first conditional. And that's you can use commands for the will clause. So, for your complete sentence, your complete future sentence, I will do this, you can use a command. So instead of saying, if it rains, I will take the bus, you can use a command. If it rains, take the bus, don't walk. Or you can also use negative conditionals. Negative conditionals can have two forms for this. So it can be if not, or you can use the conjunction unless. They're equal. If not and unless are totally equal. It's just another word. So here's some examples, like for number 1. Come to the party if you don't have work, or you don't have to work. So here we have our dependent if clause. If you don't have to work, what? Well, come to the party. And you can use a command instead of I will go to the party, you can tell your friend, come to the party if you don't have to work. So it's just an option. Just know that with the first conditional, you can do this. You can use a sentence or a command. And here's an example of number 2. She won't pass the test if she doesn't study. So here we have if not, if and not, if not, if she does not study. Or we can use unless. She won't pass the test unless she studies. No difference really, they're totally equal. Just your choice. If you prefer if not, that's cool. Or if you like unless, that's fine as well. Alright, but that's it for the first conditional. Let's also look at future time clauses, because really, that's what this is. You're looking at a future sentence. A future sentence. She will not pass the test. That's just a future sentence. And so we're talking about clauses to add, conditional clauses, and you can also add other clauses. So always, when you are adding information to a future sentence with another sentence, use the present tense. So I'm talking about these kinds of words: when, until, before, after, as soon as, and we could put if here too. It works the same way. If you use the present tense. So with all of these words, you can take a future tense sentence, and then you can attach, and you can add more information with these words. These are conjunctions to add additional information to your sentence. And when you do that, always make sure that it's in the present tense. So let's look at these examples. Dad will cook dinner after Mom gets home. So I can say Dad will cook dinner. Totally complete future sentence. But now I want more information, so I can use the conjunction after Mom gets home. We don't say Dad will cook dinner after Mom will get home. No, we never do that. The verb tense inside the dependent clause, so after Mom gets home, that is a dependent clause. Inside will always be the present simple, so gets. Another example, I won't be able to text until the plane lands. So here we have our complete future sentence. I won't be able to text, and then until when? Until what? Until the plane lands, present simple. So here, until the plane lands, that's our dependent clause, so we must use the present tense. And then additionally, as soon as he finishes studying, and now we have a comma because we put the dependent clause first, as soon as he finishes studying, we will go to the party. We'll go to the party. And so, if you want to connect sentences together this way, and if you want to add information to a future tense sentence, just always make sure it's in the present tense. That's what's important. You'll never have a future and future connected with a word like this or if. Okay, so let's look at some practice for this. So in this, I'm going to show you the sentence, and then you try to complete it with the correct verb. So my notes first, as always. So we have if plus present simple, will plus verb in the base tense. That's your structure for your first conditional. And then your future dependent clauses, present simple, which, this is a future tense, this is a dependent clause. So really, it's the same thing. It's the same idea. But, just to make it clear, we separate. All right, so here's the first sentence. The worker into trouble if they don't wear the company hat. All right, so what do you think? What is the correct form of get? Is it present simple? Do we need a modal verb? What do we do? The worker into trouble if they don't wear the company hat. All right, the answer is will get. The worker will get into trouble if they don't wear the company hat. Well, why? Well, this is if we look at our formula here. If they don't wear the company hat. Well, that is our if clause. So if plus present simple, they don't wear. So that is complete. So now I know, okay, well, in the if is present simple, the other part is present tense, or future, sorry, is future tense, will get. Okay, so next sentence. Call me if you help baking the cookies. Call me if you help baking the cookies. All right, so what do we do here? Always rely on your formula. Remember your formula. And this one's somewhat simple. No change needed. Need. Call me if you need help baking the cookies. You know, the present tense, the present simple is just only the third person has S. So all the other forms will be direct, just the verb. All right, next sentence. If you do the homework, the teacher you a better final mark. Mark here, if anyone is unfamiliar, this is British English, and mark is like the result. So you know, you take a test and you get a number. That number is your mark. So if you do the homework, the teacher you a better final mark. Try to find your independent, dependent clause, identify them, and then try to find the right verb. So for give, it is will give. So if you do the homework, the teacher will give you a better final mark. Well, why? Well, that's because we have our dependent clause first. If you do the homework, present simple, so that's done. So we know that we have present simple in one, which means the other, the teacher, will give you a better final mark. We must have will give in the other part of the sentence. Okay, the next. My sister, university, as soon as she writes her final essay. So my sister, university, as soon as she writes her final essay. So what are our parts? Because that is always how to tell what is correct. Which part of the sentence, which clause, is it the dependent or the independent? Well, this one is the independent clause, so we need will finish. My sister will finish university as soon as she writes her final essay. Okay, number 5. If I'm a taxi, I can be there in 15 minutes. If I'm a taxi, I can be there in 15 minutes. All right, so now we've got the if clause. That's what we're working with. And our formula, very clear. It's if plus the present simple. So our answer is take. No change. If I take a taxi, I can be there in 15 minutes. All right, finally, the waiter, more napkins unless you ask. What do we do here? The waiter, more napkins unless you ask. So try to, with this one, really think, what are my parts? And so which form am I needing? Present simple or will? Present simple or will? Well, the answer is won't bring. So this one's negative because we've got unless. You know, remember, if not is equal to unless. They're the same thing. So you could also say the waiter won't bring you more napkins if you don't ask. So that's using if not, or you can say unless you ask. They're both negative ideas, so we need won't. The waiter won't do it. All right. Very good. I hope these 6 sentences help show how to look at the clauses and to identify which clause. Is it the dependent clause, present simple? Is it the independent clause, will? And then the positive, negative, you know, if not, unless, and then positive if. Okay, so the next part, the education vocabulary. As I said, I'm going to compare American English to British English. So I'm going to have the definitions of 8 common education words very often used in education ideas. And so we're going to talk about the American English and then the British English. So for the first one, the early years of school, and these are ages. The early years of school are called elementary school. So that's years 5 to 10, roughly. And then the next half of school, the later half, is called high school. I'm sure many of you have heard these words before. And there's often more. There's often different parts of the United States will separate into different ways. So, there might be elementary school, high school, and then a middle school between, and they put ages differently. But generally elementary school and middle school. But so that is for, your required education. However, you can go to school younger. So these are ages 5 to 10, 11 to 18. You can also go to school at 2 to 4 years old. If you do that, you go to kindergarten. Kindergarten, that's a big word. And so this is, the year before you go to school. Additionally, next, a school that you live at. So this is a school, you leave your home, you go to the school, and then you stay at the school. This type is called a boarding school. So boarding with the idea of housing. Next, a government-owned school. So in the United States, almost all schools are owned by the government. They're paid for by tax, and these are called public schools. But we also have the opposite. So where one individual owns the school, and they do not take money from the government. So this is different, and this is called a private school. So you can have public and private schools if it's government or not owned by the government. And then next, we're talking about the leader of the school. Well, in the United States, we say the principal, P-A-L. Be very careful with spelling because there are two words here, principal and principal. The same pronunciation, different meaning. So be very careful. We are talking about the spelling here, principal. And this is kind of the leader of the school. They are in charge of the teachers and all of the work, and they they have control of the school. And then in number 8, we have the levels of study. So from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 12. And we call these grades. So in the United States, we say grades, and we count them not 1 grade, 2 grade, but with ordinal numbers. So we say first grade, second grade, third grade, 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th. So we have all of those. We don't say 1 or 2. We say first and second grade. So those are the 8 education nouns. Now let's compare the British English. So in Britain, instead of saying elementary school for early years, they say primary. And then the next half of school is called secondary. Again, just like the United States, in parts of the United Kingdom, they have more. So they might have a middle section, or they'll have another one after that has a different name. But generally, just like you can generally say elementary and high school, you can generally say primary school and secondary school. They'll cover most situations. And then the year before you start school in the UK is called nursery. So in the US, it's kindergarten or nursery. Number 4, a school where you live. Well, this is the same, actually. Both countries say boarding school, so no difference. There is a difference, though, for number 5. So government-owned schools in the UK are called state schools, not public, but state schools. And, it's because state here is a synonym for government. Okay, number 6, individually owned schools. Well, that's the same again. Same word, private and private for both countries. And then number 7, the leader of the school. This is now called the head teacher. So instead of principal, this is the head teacher. You might hear the word headmaster. That could also be used, but head teacher is generally what it is called. And then finally, number 8. So for the levels of study in the UK, they don't say grades. They say year. And they do it normal counting. Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. So they do not use the ordinal numbers. So do remember for the US, first, second, third grade. Other way for the UK, year 1, year 2, year 3. So there is a difference there. But there we go. Those are 8 common education words and the differences between US and UK English. So let's do some pronunciation for them all. So I'll say all the words, you repeat after me. So number 1, elementary, elementary. High school, high school. Kindergarten, kindergarten. This word, English took from German. So this is actually a German word, so that's why it's very big. Kindergarten. Next, boarding, boarding school. Public, private. Principal, principal. Be careful with the L sound here. The A, we don't really say it. Just principal. And then finally, grades. All right, next, primary, secondary, nursery, nursery, boarding, state, private, head teacher, and year. All right, so those were some nouns for education. Now I'm going to go to some verbs. Same system, but now they're mostly the same for both countries. So I've got 6 verbs here. So number 1, to be removed from school. Well, the verb for this is to be expelled. So this has the idea usually due to behavior. You know, a student does something bad and they cannot return to school, so they've been expelled. Next, number 2, to say someone else's work is yours. So this takes many, many forms. The word is to cheat as a verb. So maybe this is, you are writing a test, and then your friend taking the same test and you that's to cheat. So that's using their ideas as your own. It can be, this word is very, very general, so it can be that kind of test situation. It can be writing an essay and taking ideas from the internet, or it can happen in games. So, in video games or card games or board games, you're holding your cards, and maybe the person next to you, they're just trying to see what card you have while you're playing. So they are cheating. They cheat. And you can use it as a noun and call someone as a name, a cheater, and that is someone who does this. All right, number 3, to have results below the minimum, this is to fail. So for many areas, if you score from 0 to 100, 70, that's usually 70 is the minimum to achieve the grade. Well, if you have below 70, you failed. The opposite, to have above, is to pass. So those are the opposites here, to fail and to pass. And so to pass is like, 70% is the mark, 75, 80, 85, those all pass. All right, next. So this is to do an examination. So English has 2 ways to do this. So, this is actually the process of sitting down with the paper and you write the test. We use verb to take. So you take a test, you take an exam, or you can say to sit an exam. So like the verb in a chair, to sit down, you can say to sit an exam. We do not use make, we do not use do, really. It's to take or to sit an exam. All right. Number 6, then the last one, to study the same material again. Well, you can say to revise, this is UK English, or you can say to review. And this is, maybe I hope you do it for my lessons. I hope you revise and review. Maybe you watch my video, and then 3-4 days later, you read the notes again. And that's to review, just to look at the same material again to help you remember. All right. So that's everything for today's lesson. Those are all the materials We talked a lot about some grammar concepts today, so I'm going to quickly review and just go back over everything again. So I'm going to review or revise. So we talked a lot about sentence clauses. These are the smaller parts of one complete sentence. And they were independent or dependent. So they could either be alone and complete, or they were incomplete. They could not be alone. And we talked about them with conditional clauses. So something like, if I go to work, I will make money. And there we have the dependent clause, if I go to work, and then the independent clause, I will make money. And then there's the structure. We use if plus the present simple, and then will and the verb base. And then after that, we talked about future time clauses more generally with words like unless, until, after, before, as soon as. All of those are, future time clauses. And after that, make sure to use the present simple. And it's the same idea, really. First conditionals are a type. They are one of the future time clauses. So the grammar is the same. And then in addition to that, we talked about education and vocabulary and compared a lot between the UK and the United States. All right, so that's everything for today. Thank you all so much. I recommend, I always say this, but it's very good, download the notes, read again, maybe in a few hours to help yourself remember everything that we talked about, everything that you've learned. So I hope this was helpful. I hope you learned something new. Thank you all so much for coming back, and if you are a first time watching, thank you for joining us today. I hope you will all come again for the next lesson in the intermediate language series. So have a good day and a good afternoon. Bye-bye.